Our topic for today is air engineering resources. So first, let's start discussing what are air pollutants and air contaminants. Pollutants are substances that occur in the environment which has a deleterious effect on the environment. So the effect would either be on the physical environment or they may be directly toxic to organisms. There are three kinds of toxic substances, not only in air but other matrices of the environment. Namely, they may be causing cancer, so they are called carcinogenic. Then they may also cause damage to the genes, which we call as mutagens. And then they may also be classified as teratogenic, which causes abnormalities in the development of the embryo. Example of toxic substances in air will be for carcinogenic substance, we have benzopyrene from smoking. We also have mutagenic substances which damage the genes, such as polyaromatic hydrocarbons, example of which may be polychlorobiphenyl. Then for teratogens, we also have some polyaromatic hydrocarbons which can be classified also as endocrine disrupting chemicals. Later we will discuss what is a specific example of which. Now, when you say pollutants in air, basically the atmosphere has several naturally occurring greenhouse gases. So anything that is in excess of concentration of these greenhouse gases may also be classified as pollutants, because pollutant may be classified as too much of a good thing. So CO2 or carbon dioxide per se is not a pollutant, yet a higher concentration than its normal concentration in the atmosphere would make carbon dioxide a pollutant and may cause phenomena such as global warming. So let's try to classify some air pollutants. One of the classifications is whether they are criteria pollutants or not. Criteria pollutants are emissions to the urban air traditionally seen as polluting substances. So for example, in urban areas, what do we basically have? We basically have industrial plants. We also have vehicles. So all of this would be burning particular fossil fuels, namely refined crude oil as well as coal, and this would be automatically emitting certain pollutants. So let's discuss some examples of criteria pollutants which are actually enlisted in your Clean Air Act or RA 8749. One of which is carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is colorless, odorless, tasteless gas. However, this carbon monoxide is manifested by black smoke. Why? Because carbon monoxide is a product of incomplete combustion. So what are the two reasons why do you have incomplete combustion? We have number one, either the machine or the engine of a particular vehicle would not be efficient or would not be burning efficiently. And then the other reason may be there is knocking. So in order to avoid this, you have to make sure that there is complete combustion in an engine of an industrial plant as well as an engine of a vehicle. Now, your carbon monoxide is required, or the requirement for the concentration of carbon monoxide should not be greater than 30 ppm. Otherwise, carbon monoxide would replace oxygen in the bloodstream and would be forming a very obnoxious substance called carboxyhemoglobin. This would prevent oxygen running in the blood, and therefore this may be cause of vehicular suffocation. Now, another criteria pollutant is the NOx, or what we call thermal NOx. Although the fossil fuel does not contain nitrogen, atmosphere is very abundant of nitrogen, and therefore at very, very high temperature, which normally occurs in the engine of an industrial plant as well as a vehicle, you will be producing NOx from the product of NO and oxygen. So, NOx is also termed as thermal NOx because oxidation happens in the atmosphere at very, very high temperature. Now, another criteria pollutant is SOx. SOx is derived from burning of fossil fuels and particularly burning of low-grade coal, because it has been found out that coal contains less than 1% even if it's already a high grade. Now, if it's a low-grade coal, which is abundant in nature, you would be having more than 2% of sulfur. And therefore, when you oxidize or when you burn this coal containing sulfur, you will be producing SOx. It can also come from non-ferrous metal, smelting, H2S from volcanoes, and you may also have it from mercaptans. Now, what are some of the effects of SOx? One of the effects would be acid rain. Why? Because as we have discussed before, your SOx may be reacting with water in the atmosphere. Therefore, you'll be producing sulfuric acid. For carbon monoxide, since it's a product of incomplete combustion, what makes the black smoke coming from a muffler of a vehicle, if it's classified as a smoke belching vehicle, would be its byproduct, which we call soot, SOOT. This is also classified as one of the criteria pollutant, which is under particulate matter, which we will discuss later. Now, for NOx is also known as status symbol pollutant because it is normally higher in cities than in rural areas. So if you have too much or too many of the industrial plants and too many of the vehicles, that would an indication that it's an urban area. Therefore, we assume that burning fossil fuels such as coal and refined petroleum would also be yielding NOx. Now, NOx is also colorless and odorless, and at high concentration of this gives reddish-brown color to the city haze. Now, in our case, if you take a look at the sunset and the atmosphere or the sky would look like reddish-brown, that is so good for a photographer but not so good for an environmental engineer like us, because that's an indication that you have high NOx. Now, where do you get NOx? You have it from, aside from the burning of fuel, you have it also from power generation plants. You have it from industrial furnaces, transportations, and even waste disposal systems such as incinerators. Now, what are the effects of NOx? One of the major effects of NOx would be the photochemical smog. As you have seen from our discussion, photochemical smog is a combination of the criteria pollutants, and one of which is NOx. So this photochemical smog is injurious to plants, animals, and human health. And also for human, it can cause temporary or even at high concentration, it may yield permanent blindness. Now, for, NOx would also give an impact on the chemical balance of nutrients in water bodies, because as you have known, your N, your nitrogen, may be also causing eutrophication in the body of water, as you have learned in our water lecture. Then this eutrophication will now lead to O2 depletion. Now for SOx, one of its major impacts, also together with NOx, would be the acid rain, because SOx as well as NOx are non-metal oxides, and therefore if they react with water vapor present in the air, you will be yielding strong acids such as sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And therefore, this would also be deleterious to human health. This can also damage plants and animals, and then this may also affect corrosion of materials. Now, SOx may also reduce visibility. because of the formation of smog. Now, for your SOx, as mentioned, you can see from the slide a photomicrograph of a coal sample that shows pyrite. Pyrite is the principal source of sulfur emissions from burning coal. Now, in the Philippines, we can get rid of having sulfur dioxide or sulfur trioxide in the atmosphere, or SOx, because we have abundant of low-grade fossil fuels, particularly low-grade coal. So what do we do about it is that we blend the low-grade coal with the high-grade coal. So as chemical engineers, you have to make sure that the blending would address, number one, the proper heating value. So you must have the ratio of the low-grade and the high-grade coal, so that you could attain the optimum heating value. And then number two, you have to also ensure reduction of SOx emission with that correct ratio of low-grade and high-grade coal. Now, in this PowerPoint slide, you can see here the specific reactions that would occur when SOx as well as NOx react with water vapor in the atmosphere. Now, an acid rain has a pH equal to 3, while a normal rain has a pH of 5.6. So you could see the difference. So you imagine that you are taking a bath under water or a solution with a pH equals to 3 if the area is considered to be highly acidic and experiencing acid rain. The next criteria pollutant that we're going to discuss is particulate matter, or sometimes it's also called total suspended particulate. Now, there are two kinds of particulate matter. You may have PM2.5 and PM10. PM10 means the diameter of the particulate matter is about 10 micrometer, while PM2.5 means the diameter of the particulate matter is about 2.5 micrometer. Definitely, the PM2.5 is more deleterious in causing respiratory illness because of its very fine particulate matters. Now, example of these PM10 as well as PM2.5 are aerosols, soot, which is a byproduct of incomplete combustion. You have also dust, smoke, pollen, asbestos, fibers, arsenic, droplets of sulfuric acid, PCBs, oils, and pesticides. Now, for asbestos, it has been used before as the material for firemen's suit. For that reason, they have found this kind of disease, which is common among firemen, which they call as asbestosis. And therefore, for this reason, since asbestos is a good insulator, they have replaced it with another material which would not cause this disease anymore. Also, since we have discussed that one example of particulate matter would be pollen from primarily agricultural waste, they have also found out that there's a kind of disease that is common among farmers in cotton farms. Now, they call this disease as white lung disease. Now, for a coal-fired power plant, they have also found a certain kind of disease common among their workers. And guess what? How they call the disease? It's called black lung disease, wherein the lungs of a particular human found to have this disease or illness would have some black spots. Now, what are the sources of particulate matter? So it may also be coming from combustion of fossil fuel, particularly incomplete combustion, as we have mentioned. And then these non-combustible ash or incompletely burned particulate matter is termed as soot. Then it can also come from materials handling processes such as crushing, grinding, or bulk loading of dry materials. So most often than not, we tell our clients in industries that in order to have or to contain these fugitive sources, they must have good housekeeping. And then for their conveyors, we recommend that they use closed conveyor rather than open conveyors. Then you also have some natural sources such as dust storm, and then volcanic ash and forest fires. Now, for industries, we also recommend good housekeeping because in some cases, if we have fugitive sources such as what we had in one of our clients, a cement manufacturing company, wherein they just pile up their empty bags of cement, these fugitive sources are causes of particulate matter, which not only affects the health as well as the atmospheric surroundings of the plant, but also the turbidity of the wastewater. Now, with respect to volcanic ash and forest fires, due to climate change, we are already experiencing a lot of this. And in order to avoid this, local governments are actually assigning some forest rangers so as to avoid and to kill or put off the fires as soon as possible. Now, what would be the effect of particulate matter? Okay, number one, it may be one of the components, or it is a component of the formation of photochemical smog. So if it is in a tropical area like us, it's the formation of smog, but in temperate countries, there's a formation of haze. Now, due to this may also have a domino effect of soiling of buildings. Then you may have also corrosive damage, then alteration of local weather, and then damage human health, particularly, as I've mentioned, respiratory health or respiratory diseases. So you have coughing, painful breathing, chronic bronchitis, and of course, after it has landed on the soil, this may also retard plant growth. With respect to alteration of local weather, how would the PM affect the local weather? We have experienced that when in 1991 Mount Pinatubo erupted. The Mount Pinatubo is located in Pampanga, but we here in Metro Manila, particularly here in Manila, we were affected by this particulate matter coming from the volcanic eruption. How? Every afternoon we were experiencing rain, heavy rains. Why? Because the particulate matter serves as a cooling, or has a cooling effect. So it serves as a nuclei. So if you would recall the process of cloud seeding during summer, what do scientists do? They actually spray NaCl as a nuclei in the clouds so as to initiate immediate or faster condensation. Now, in this case, you don't need the nuclei of NaCl anymore, but since particulate matter would be present in the atmosphere, these would collect all the water vapor molecules so as to make the condensation faster. And therefore, if the rate of condensation is faster, the rate of precipitation would also be faster. And that's the reason why we experience this kind of heavy rains during those times that Mount Pinatubo had just erupted. And of course, we also experience here that every now and then we had to wipe our furnitures, our cars, because of the particulate matter, the dust that would be coming from Pampanga. So those are some impacts of particulate matter. The next criteria pollutant that we're going to discuss is VOC. So VOCs stand for volatile organic compounds. These refer to any organics with an appreciable vapor pressure such that they vaporize when exposed to air. They come from incomplete combustion. So instead of having carbon dioxide from complete combustion, you would be producing, for example, methane or CH4 as a product of incomplete combustion. Or you may also have it from evaporation of organic liquids. So organic liquids are basically utilized in industries as solvents. You can also have it from cars and other vehicles, then solvent-based paints, and then naturally you can also have it from forests and vegetation, because we know that when you burn wood, you have formation of methane or other VOCs or combustible gases. Then biological normal process such as bacterial decomposition of organic matter may also yield CH4 in the absence of oxygen. It may also come from incomplete combustion of coal, oil, and wood, processing and use of petroleum. So when you go to Petron or any petroleum refineries, they have this what you call a flamethrower. It's like something that you see in Olympics. So it's a big flamethrower wherein they emit from time to time volatile organic compounds so as to release pressure from the process. So these may also add up in the formation of VOC in the atmosphere. I have also learned when I attended a seminar about trees that normally, in order for us to avoid pollution, air pollution for that matter, we should plant trees, correct? You have learned it in your grade school. However, I've learned from that seminar that it's also depending on what type of tree do you plant. So if you plant trees which gives fruit or some flowers for this that produce aromatic smell, these are actually considered as a polluter. So example of this would be the peppermint or any tree that has an aromatic compound. So whatever emission you get from these kind of trees, this may be classified under volatile organic compounds. So the seminar emphasizes that it's not always the case that you have to plant trees to avoid air pollution or air contamination. It depends upon the trees that you choose. But of course, another source of volatile organic compound is smoking. So there is a formation of RCH double band CHR, which is coming from smoking. So this produces benzopyrene, which is from the structure is carcinogenic. The next slide that you see would be a detailed reaction of the formation of photochemical smog. So after discussing some of the criteria pollutants, you would notice from this reaction that you have NOx, you also have O3, your ozone, you also have your VOC, then you also have your particulate matter that would add up in order to come up with an obnoxious and deleterious substance called peroxyacyl nitrate. This is the compound which gives irritation to the eye. So higher concentration of this would lead to temporary and eventually permanent blindness. That's why when you go to high place, even during mornings, you would see formation of this fog-like substance. It's not actually fog, but you're actually producing a smog. So since it is done in the presence or the processes occur or the reactions occur in the presence of sunlight, we call the smog photochemical smog. The next criteria pollutant is actually an anthropogenic substance. This is lead. Lead is a metal found naturally in the environment as well as in manufactured products. Technically, since lead is abundant in the Earth's crust as well as in the atmosphere at minimal concentration, it should not be a pollutant. However, for the last 30 to 40 years, due to industrialization, we have utilized a certain kind of anti-knock agent which contains lead. This anti-knock agent is what we call tetraethyl lead or TEL. Now basically, the reason why they add anti-knock agent is to increase or improve the octane rating of fuel that is refined. Because if you would recall your chemical process industry or CPI, you would learn there that crude oil is actually 100 of carbon atoms with hydrogen. So it's a hydrocarbons with very, very long chain. Now, in order for it to be utilized, particularly for transportation or as fuel, you have to have this chain of C8 to C12. So if you enter the crude oil in fractional distillation, there's a certain fraction that is for fuel. So C8 to C12. However, within this range, you still have to improve because knocking still occurs. Now, what is knocking? This knocking occurs because of two reasons. Probably it's the engine that is not working efficiently, or number two, the fuel has to be refined more. Now, no matter how you refined it in any petroleum refinery, they still found out that they need to add an anti-knock agent to avoid knocking and to preserve the engine of the machine or of the vehicle. So, in order to do that, they add this additive, which we call TAL. However, since it contains lead, and as mentioned, for the last 30 to 40 years, since lead also is a persistent inorganic pollutant, it cannot be decomposed in any matrix of the environment. It can only be transformed from one form to another. And therefore, since we keep on burning here, right and left, in our industrial plants as well as in vehicles, we have accumulated too much of the lead. So it has been replaced since the implementation of Clean Air Act or RA 8749 with a particular anti-knock agent called MTBE or methyl tertiary butyl ether. So this MTBE doesn't contain any more lead. For that reason, you could go now to the gasoline and you could no longer find any leaded gasoline. So we normally get unleaded gasoline since the implementation of RA 8749. Now, aside from motor vehicles and industrial sources, you can also have lead from, of course, metals processing such as lead smelters. And you could also have this from waste incinerators and utilities and lead acid battery manufacturers. For incinerators, normally the lead could be found from the ash that would be burned from the coal. So since this is just a waste disposal facility, we don't use high-grade coal. And therefore, low-grade coal doesn't just contain the sulfur, but also some heavy metals present in the atmosphere. What would be the effect of lead? One of which is damage or damages organs. The problem with lead being a heavy metal is that it damages important organs such as kidneys, liver, brain, and our nerves. That's the reason also why it can be attributed to osteoporosis because lead has plus 2 charge, an oxidation number of plus 2. So it can exchange with one of the most important ions in our body, which is calcium. So they have both plus 2 oxidation number. Therefore, it can damage our bones. Now, it may even lead further to damaging the bone marrow, wherein the bone marrow is known to be where our blood cells are produced. And for this reason, some people may be found to have this disease, anemia, and at worst, they may have leukemia because of contamination of lead. Now, these may also cause reproductive disorders because lead has been found to decrease sperm loss or sperms for males. So it may also cause reproductive disorder. It can also cause seizures, mental retardation, behavioral disorders, memory problems, and mood changes. Because of this, it can be attributed to learning deficits and lowered IQ. It can also lead to high blood pressure, heart diseases, and as mentioned, anemia or weak blood. The next criteria pollutant is ozone. Ozone, just like other gases present in the atmosphere, is odorless and colorless gas. It's O3. Now, O3 may be good or bad depending on its location. So, if the ozone is present in the stratosphere, what do you know about it? It's a good ozone because we need this ozone to protect us from harmful ultraviolet rays coming from the sun. However, we have known that this ozone is only maintained at very, very thin layer. Now, the moment you have it thicker, this would be leading to the formation of bad ozone, which is also called the tropospheric ozone. So, if the ozone is near us, near the humans, or at the lower part of the atmosphere, that's what we call tropospheric ozone, or classified as a bad ozone. Now, what would dictate whether it's good or bad? Now, if it is at ground level, which is affected by two weather conditions, such as temperature, high temperature, or the wind that would be blowing the O3, that would tell you whether you have produced tropospheric ozone. For this reason, since it is found to be abundant at high temperature or with weather with high temperature, ozone is also called summertime pollutant. Now, where do we get ozone? We basically get it also from motor vehicles and industrial sources. The same explanation or the same principle such that of nitrogen or NOx. Because O2 is also abundant in the atmosphere, so if you oxidize it further, you produce this O3. Again, too much of O3 near us or at the troposphere or at the ground level would be detrimental to our health. So what would be its effects? Some of its effects. You may have irritated lung airways, which can cause inflammation, much like of a sunburn. Then it can also cause too much wheezing, coughing, pain when taking a deep breath during outdoor activities or exercise. It has been found out that O3 would be high, especially during rush hours. So repeated exposure for several months with O3 can cause permanent lung damage, can also cause aggravated asthma, reduced lung capacity, and susceptibility to pneumonia and bronchitis.